We're looking at Ottawa now this morning, rain beginning in the nation's capital, and we are waiting to hear more from Ottawa today about the distribution of the critically needed PPE, that personal protective equipment. The Prime Minister is scheduled to hold his daily briefing outside Rideau Cottage, and there will doubtless be questions about that. There is a pressing need for that critical gear, things like ventilators and masks and gloves and shields. We're hearing from doctors across the country about shortages. The Canadian Medical Association has just released a poll today of almost 5,000 physicians, and they're reporting, and this is a quote from the release, a much starker picture of the state of supply than what some of our political leaders have been sharing. That's an issue the Prime Minister and the other First Ministers of this country spoke about last night in their virtual meeting. Janice McGregor is in Ottawa with more details on what came of that. Good morning, Janice.
Good morning, Heather. Yes, we're hearing that conversation between First Ministers did not feature the bickering and belly aching that sometimes erupts at that table. Instead, a lot of goodwill, a real understanding of what's at stake here. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney even tweeting, saying on social media that he was very moved by the solidarity shown between the premiers and the Prime Minister as they all grapple with how to deal with these challenges. And indeed, you were just talking about these shortages of equipment that are starting to be reported by healthcare workers at their facilities. And people have been questioning whether there is enough stockpiled. On this call last night, sources telling our colleagues, Heather, that some provinces agreed to forego shipments that would normally be coming to their areas that aren't as hard hit so that they could be diverted, sent to Ontario and Quebec, where we have seen real spikes in cases and where people are really bracing themselves for the possibility that there could be a critical surge at hospitals, other facilities over the next few days that could see their supplies depleted. There's now an understanding that not only in Quebec, but also in Ontario, supplies as they did stand anyway, maybe only would have lasted for another week or so. However, the Prime Minister has said, the officials are telling us that in the last few days, a lot more supplies have arrived. Some 10 million masks, for example, that are now being inspected and prepared for delivery to the places that need them, along with more gloves, more swabs, other things that the frontline workers desperately asking for. While there are concerns about testing and whether the data they have about these spikes is really reflecting the current situation, it's not clear how much time everyone has to get these supplies where they're needed. Even though some industries are stepping up, retooling, governments providing financing for that, everyone is kind of holding their breath to see if they can get these measures done on time.
Hearing from the Foreign Affairs Minister, Janice, as well, that Canada has spoken to China about getting additional supplies. Any information about that call?
Yeah, and this is really interesting and critical, Heather. The readout from Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe Champagne's office says that he asked for the Chinese government's help to make sure that shipments bound for Canada keep moving. Of course, he also raised other tensions between the two countries, including the two Canadians who are still detained in that country as the extradition case for a Huawei executive here in Canada drags on. But why does this matter? Here's Health Minister Patty Hajdu yesterday talking about the difficulties and the challenge of procuring more medical equipment on the global market. Take a listen.
We're encouraging provinces and territories to work as closely with us to do bulk procuring at the federal level. It does give us bigger clout when Team Canada is buying things, and Canada, the full weight of Canada is behind those orders and those logistics that go into actually getting product from many countries, but particularly China.
China's manufacturing capacity to make medical supplies is roaring back. That is probably good news for the global outlook as a whole, but it does raise the possibility of some geopolitical games here. Earlier this week, China did put export controls on its outgoing shipments, ostensibly for quality control purposes, but it also gives Chinese officials more scope over the timing and the destination of the things that China is making. And that makes countries that have ongoing tensions with China really nervous.
Janice, thank you very much. Janice McGregor is in Ottawa.